Hello. Ooh, they came back. Oh, thank goodness. My name is Shaull, and with me is...
I'm Rebecca Booth.
And thank you so much for coming back and checking us out. This is K&K Speaks, the podcast where we talk about stuff that just ain't being talked about and, being for real about it, too, right?
Yeah.
Today, we are going to be talking about, starting the therapy process. So if you have been struggling or have been thinking about it, or if you've had people encouraging you to maybe start to chat with a therapist, and you're kind of like, well, I don't know what to expect. I'm kind of scared. It kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies just even thinking about going into a therapist's office. Today, we kind of just want to talk about that process and what it may look like to hopefully help with that, because we really want to break down more of the stigma around mental health and receiving support. So, in that kind of line, there is still a lot of stigma surrounding going and chatting with a therapist. So, I know I've heard it a lot, and I know you have as well.
Yep. Well, maybe. I don't know what you're going to say.
Well, you're supposed to be reading my mind. Duh.
I did take
Anyway.
my mind reading pills today.
Oh, okay. All right. They just haven't clicked in yet? Oh, okay. All right. I heard it that many people that may have come in for the first time to chat with me, maybe they've said, oh yeah, I've been wanting to come in for a long time, but people have just said, oh, you just need to suck it up, or oh, just get over it, or
Pray
no,
it away.
yeah, or therapist isn't going to help you. Therapy is not going to help you. You're just super crazy. And so there's just so much of a stigma, even talking about to other people, hey, I'm really kind of struggling. I'm thinking about going and chatting with someone. And so, yes, comparatively, 30 years ago from today, it's better. But we still got a long way to go.
Especially with insurance.
Well, yeah, insurance. But I think just in general, I've heard a lot of cases, even just recently, that people still get told you're crazy, you're acting crazy. And I think, honestly, what would the word crazy really do good in describing? To be honest. I really don't think anything.
No.
I think we should probably just nix that. So
I use
that's
bananas.
Yeah, bananas.
Mm-hmm.
I use struggle bus. Sometimes we got to hop on the struggle bus for a while if we're just having a hard time. We might just ride around that struggle bus for a couple blocks if we need to, for however long we need to. And then when we're feeling better, we just hop off the struggle bus. And then we're good to go. And when we struggle again, we will hop back on. So instead of thinking about yourself going crazy, going nuts, use some different language. And again, that's what I've kind of talked about in the last two. But I won't focus too much on the language part. But I think probably the biggest thing too is that if you hear someone that's saying I really think I need to go in and talk to a therapist or some kind of professional that would be a support to help with some kind of treatment. Maybe it would be, substance abuse or something like that. Please support that person, because what harm is it going to do you to support that person and encourage that person to go in and get help? I mean, why do you need to make comments Like, oh, just suck it up. I mean, what really is that harm going to do to you? So,
Well, if you're a boomer, those deep, dark family secrets are going to get out.
that is part of it too, is that I think some of that stigma is stemming from society. But I think we're kind of maybe coming out of that a little bit.
I hope so.
Yeah. But that's kind of part of why we're doing this. Being real.
God.
Anyway, all right. So moving on, I didn't want to kind of spend too much on the whole language piece today, specifically in this, but okay. So people are like, okay, all right, I need to start, but I don't know where to start. So I think the first important thing is to research. And so decide, and I think the location of where you are probably deters a lot of things. So if you're in a rural area in Iowa, I think that's going to probably determine a lot of things. Rebecca and I, we do what's considered different platforms. So we see people in person where they come into our office, but we actually, where we used to work, this was pre-pandemic, and we kind of touched on this in the first episode. We saw a lot of people in the rural areas. There's been a lot of initiatives, I know specifically in the state of Iowa, where telehealth, I know for like telemedicine and stuff like that, are being really, they're trying to reach the rural areas in Iowa because one, there's a need, and two, there's just not services in those areas. So people are having to drive, like we're talking an hour, 40 minutes away just to receive maybe a therapy session one time a week. And that sometimes is not realistic for people. So Rebecca and I have done a lot of telehealth sessions with people that are in very, very small rural areas in Iowa. So, depending on where you are located, depending on your situation, it may determine what possible platform realistically you may do, what, is realistic and what you're able to do, basically, I think. So, what I mean by that, can you do telehealth? Is that going to work, or is in person going to work? So, kind of what I really suggest is that it's called Psychology Today. And Psychology Today is like, I don't know what you would call it,
It's
but
a database with therapists, psychiatrists, different types of therapists.
yeah. So basically, it's the mother lode, or it's like, I don't want to say it's like the match.com of therapist
But it
world,
is.
but it kind of is. So pretty much a lot of therapists have a profile on Psychology Today. And so they basically list what they specialize in, what platforms they do. So, like the telehealth in person, where they're located. They usually have a picture of themselves on there, which I think is usually pretty important. You can kind of get like, oh yeah, I could kind of jive with that a little bit. What insurances they take. So we talked about insurances. So that kind of allows you to do kind of a search. So if you're located in Lamont, Iowa, then you can actually put in the search bar Lamont, Iowa, and it'll kind of come up with some results for you. You are able to then directly contact the therapist via email, phone call, and stuff like that through Psychology Today. And it's as simple as just pulling up the website and looking through it.
Yeah.
And then I know that there was another one that I heard of, and I do believe it was like therapistmatch.com. So I think it was like therapist match. I don't know very much about that one, but I would assume that it's very similar to like Psychology Today. And then, of course, you can just Google it, and you can say therapist near me, and it would probably do around the same thing. So once you to kind of find some possibilities that you're like, okay, I'm gonna probably try this. All right, this seems kind of like a good thing here. This one's close to me. I can do the telehealth. This one says they take my insurance. Then reach out to them, contact them. Again, you can email, you can call, whichever is going to work best for you. And when you contact them, some probably important questions you want to ask once you contact. So you can say your name and say that I'm interested in starting some services. Maybe note which type of services. Is it individual? Is it family? That type of thing. One of the first questions you might want to ask, are they currently taking clients? I talked about that in the insurance one, that unfortunately there's that epidemic right now where there's long wait lists. So one thing you might want to find out is there a wait list right now? Are they currently taking new people? And you want to double check to make sure they take your insurance. Now, in the event you may not have insurance, you might want to ask if they do a sliding fee scale or if they have any other resources that would help you be able to receive services. So they may be associated with a health clinic, or they may talk to you about, well, are you interested in applying for insurance? I know that there's several health clinics, like community health clinics, that work with people to apply for insurance. So then that way, they help you apply for insurance, and you can also schedule an appointment to get in. So there's those possibilities as well. Let's just say you get through those steps, and don't be surprised if there's some paperwork involved. So there might be some, or maybe a lot. It depends on the therapist and the company or the agency. So probably the same kind of paperwork you're going to see in there is like releases. So if you haven't heard of it, there's this thing called HIPAA. And HIPAA says, well, I can't really say things to this person over here unless I have your consent. And I need your consent signed right here. And I need this person's information on this form. So it lets us know who you want involved in your treatment. Who is it okay that we speak to? Because as therapists and healthcare providers, we have to abide by certain laws and policies. And so we have to do our part to make sure we know who is okay to talk to in regards on your behalf. So there probably is going to be a lot of what's called releases in that type of paperwork. There is, more importantly, going to be a consent of treatment. And the consent of treatment is like being able to send a bill to your insurance, so you hopefully don't have to pay. So that's going to probably be in that packet of information. And most importantly, always ask questions. If you don't understand anything in that paperwork, ask to have it gone over with you. You always have the right to have someone go over that paperwork with you. I personally, as a therapist, don't like just shoving paperwork in front of people without going over it with them. I want to make sure people understand what they are signing. And if I go over something and if they have a question, that we go over it then before they sign. So don't let someone just push some paperwork in front of you if you don't understand it. That's one of the rights that you do have.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, any questions? Ask. Don't be afraid to ask. And you also have the right to get a copy of the consents and the paperwork that you do sign. So that way you have a record of what you signed at the first appointment. So if any questions come up, you can refer to your copy in your own records that you have. So you also have that right. Okay, next step,
What?
scheduling. So you have the paperwork, and I want to kind of maybe jump back a little bit. So depending on the agency or the therapist and just kind of how they run, they may require for you to fill out the paperwork either prior or after you would request this. But sometimes, and it does depend on the therapist, you can request kind of like what's called a consult. And a consult is maybe like a 15-minute little chat with a therapist that you will probably be meeting and entering into treatment with. And the important thing about this is that you kind of get to meet the person before your initial appointment. This is kind of what I like to say as you interview the therapist. And especially if this is your very first time into treatment, with not knowing going into this what to expect. I've had a lot of people that have come in and their very first evaluation, and they literally have been shaking because they have been so incredibly anxious. They didn't know what to expect. They didn't know me. They didn't know what I was going to do. And by golly, they were already going through so much symptoms or what they experienced prior to even coming into the first appointment. And I have to be honest, in a lot of those cases, it was very, very severe. And I will never, ever forget a more recent within probably the last year at the initial intake. And this is from a therapist's side. And I know we're talking more from a client's perspective, but it kind of helps open your eyes, or at least that would hopefully be the point from a therapist's side, is that a young lady came in and she was a teenager. And this was the very first experience with therapy that they had. And came in to the initial evaluation, is what we refer to it as, and sat down. And of course, I introduced myself, and I like to talk about what it is they would expect, and that we would go over some questions, and I'm just asking to see how best I can support them throughout treatment. And I literally just kind of opened up my mouth, and this young lady broke down in tears. And it was because so incredibly nervous and did not know what to expect. And throughout the conversation, it became clear was just really incredibly anxious and kind of was beside herself. And so due to that, I got the most of the information that I needed for that time. And I tried to make the experience as best as I could because I knew that she really needed the treatment. And I really didn't want to try and turn her off. But throughout the whole entire session, I had to fight my internal thinking on, am I that scary? Am someone's really afraid of me? And I had to just consciously sit there and say, no, she's scared of the process. She's scared of not knowing. And that I didn't need to take it so personally. And so, again, this is part of why we're doing this podcast, is because of situations like that. And if we can help people not experience that on their first time, then this is well worth it. And I ended that evaluation and said, I think I've got enough information, because how I look at it is that clients and therapists need to build a relationship. And the information will come when you build that relationship. And again, I didn't want this experience to not be like a really negative experience for this young lady. And at that point, she apparently had become more comfortable with me. And she asked, "Is that it?" And I said, "Well, I think for today, I've got enough of my information for right now. Yeah, I think we'll call it good." And she says, "Well, how much time do we have left?" And I said, "Well, we have 20 more minutes." And it came to be that her and I spent 20 minutes just one-on-one together, working on building that rapport. And that was vital. And I was able to ask this young lady kind of more just, I don't know, kind of more like, what did you expect? I realize you were kind of upset today. And we kind of joked, but she said, "I was expecting a young lady." And I said, "Well, that's sure out the door. I'm not young, but she said a very uptight young lady that wasn't really going to be listening to me." So throughout that process, it really hit me what clients experience when they come in for their first appointment. And I really, really encourage therapists to please remember that. Even if you've been doing this for 15 years or 1 year, we need to remember that. So, with the consult that you can request, and some therapists that will do, it's very important to kind of go with your gut feeling as a client, because building the rapport with your therapist is going to be vital for your treatment. I emphasize this because not every therapist is going to work for every client that they meet with. I certainly am not a one mold fits all. I'm not. And I realize that. And it's okay. It's okay for me to meet a client for the first time and for them to say, I don't think this is going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's totally okay, because you need that therapeutic relationship. You need to be comfortable. You need to be able to have trust. Because if you're like, "Oh my gosh, I have therapy, I don't want to go see him. Oh my gosh, I'd rather go to the dentist or something."
Okay, but I like going to the dentist.
Well, and I was going to say, sorry, dentists, if there's any people out there watching this. I was just trying to think of what majority of people would not like to go to. But is that going to really be beneficial to you when you're trying to heal, when you're trying to process and work through things, when you're dreading going to your therapist? No, it's not. So, if you are not liking the therapist that you're going to, then don't go to them. Work to find another person that you are going to feel more comfortable with. because more than likely you're not going to tell them what's really going on. You're probably going to skip sessions, which not is cool. Uh, Definitely not cool from a therapist perspective. But on the first visit, you're going to kind of get a vibe. You're going to get the vibe like, yeah, I guess I can jive with that. But it will take a while to build that relationship. And I think a lot of people need to remember that. And it is okay. Because I don't expect a person to just walk in my office and to just spill their guts to me. Like, I wouldn't want to do that. So I don't expect another person to do that. So, yeah. So a lot of times therapists will offer that consult. And you will often not be charged for that. So, in all the time that I have been doing this for umpteenth years, I have met 2 people that one has been a therapist that has had the mindset that they are a therapist that fits all. And that is the wrong mindset to have. And that therapist, I'm being real with you, they need to probably be reevaluating themselves. And I had an experience with a supervisor who also was, a therapist, saying the therapist that they were supervising needed to mold themselves to fit all. And that was not appropriate. But that was only 2. In all that I've come across in all of my years. Because all the other therapists know I'm not a good fit for all.
Except for me.
Sure. So, all the other therapists know it's okay. They understand. They understand if you say, I'm just not jiving with this. I'm sorry. I'd like to go ahead and find a different therapist. And a lot of times they will help you. Or they would be like, well, would you kind of want to just like see me for a little bit, at least to give you some sort of support until you find a new therapist? So two people out of how many I've run across realize I know I'm not a fit for all. So it is okay to tell a therapist, if you're not jiving, hey, I'm not jiving. Right?
Yeah.
We're cool with that. Because we want you to find that fit.
My feelings will not be hurt.
No. We're like, hey, cool. That is fine. So, the very first appointment, I've kind of talked about this. So, when you actually go in, it's usually referred to a diagnostic evaluation, an assessment. Some therapists refer to it differently, but this kind of first time meeting is kind of gathering information about you. You're the rock star. You're like center of attention. You are also, of course, meeting the therapist a little bit more in depth. You're scoping out their digs, getting a feel for if you're doing in person, like their office, their telehealth type of thing. And so a lot of times they're going to ask you questions that usually are from when you were kind of born, your childhood, so like your development, and that's called your social history. So it's kind of finding out some stuff and your experiences from your past, kind of till current, and then some other things like medical, physical, and then kind of what is going on now to bring you in that you're struggling with, that you would like help with. Those are some of those questions on this assessment. And then kind of what are you wanting to achieve by coming in and chatting with someone? And those are kind of like the treatment goals that you come up with the therapist. So a year from now, 6 months from now, where would you like to be? What would you like to have gained by coming in and talking to someone? So, those are some of the questions that may be asked by who you're coming in and chatting with. And I always note answer with what you feel the most comfortable with. Now, the more information you do provide, it does help the therapist with kind of thinking out your treatment in general and how they can best support you. But again, the more you feel comfortable with the therapist, that information will come. So there is kind of that balancing. There kind of is that balancing. I swear I'm going to take this mic out like one of these times. Yeah, Mediaverse will probably not like me very well, but there's the balancing, right? But it is okay. It is okay if you just do not feel comfortable and you give what you can. Therapists will take that and we'll continue to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to add though, if you are a minor getting therapy, we will not tell your parents what we talked about in therapy. That's private and confidential.
Yep. Unless
Thoughts of suicide, thoughts of wanting to harm, kill yourself and others, and well, child abuse, dependent adult abuse. That's iffy. It depends on the situation and the parent and what's going on at home. If we talk to the parent or not.
yes. And so we'll probably cover that in another time, a little bit more in depth of what can be disclosed and like during a session to other parties.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that later. But hopefully you were able to take a little bit from this. If you are thinking about getting help, we encourage that. And also we encourage other people to just support others. Work on changing that language. And it doesn't hurt you for someone else to get the help that they need. So thanks for checking us out today. And thanks for keep coming back and watching our videos as two therapists just kind of muddle through doing this podcast thing. So, all right. Thank you so much, guys. And we'll check you later. Bye.
Bye.